Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanchez, Jim Jones with another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today our guest is going to be Isaac Ford. He's going to discuss how he's being targeted because he is a black Republican. So this should be interesting. Jim, you have anything?
Yes, actually I do. And I'm not going to say it's a public service announcement. It is literally a rant.
You said that last week about public service announcement.
Yeah. So anyway, I just want to first start off by thanking our guest for coming in. And our guest got me, he's one of the reasons why I came up with this rant, because it's something that I've had on my mind for a long time.
Okay.
All right. So I've always had the opinion that the most dangerous thing to American ideals are white liberals. I had no idea until I started reading Malcolm X that Malcolm X said the same thing. And if you really honestly take a look at our inner cities, which most of them are run by liberal blacks, how do they get elected though? They get elected because white people elect them because they're afraid that if they don't vote for a black person, that they'll be considered a liberal or part of the problem. So my whole thing is this, like, why haven't we come to a point in this country, and I get it, it's probably easier for me to look at it this way as a white male, but I fail to understand how we've gotten to a point in our history and all the years that we've went through things in this country that I honestly don't understand why white liberals don't realize that they're actually doing more harm to blacks than good. Because even though he wasn't my favorite president, I do think he had a really good line when he said that it's the soft bigotry of low expectations. And so for me, it frustrates me that white people honestly think that they're doing a favor to black people by basically patronizing them and saying, and giving them a free pass. And I don't think that if, and this is kind of a cliche, but I've grown up through sports. I've grown up around black people my whole life. And I can tell you right now, the most conservative people I've ever met in my life are black parents. So why white people think they're doing a favor to black people by not holding them accountable or giving them an excuse for not holding themselves accountable, to me, is a problem. And I think, so basically in a nutshell, yes, I blame white people for a lot of what's going on in our black communities. They may mean well, but they're not doing the right thing. If you don't, as a boss, if I don't hold somebody accountable and it's not important to me, then it's not going to be important to my workers. Right. You know, if I basically just say, hey, Steve, I need you to do this, and don't care if you get it done or not, like, are you going to care?
Yeah.
So that's my rant about you may think you're helping, but you're not helping by patronizing people, whether it's black or white.
I don't have a rant.
You don't? Okay.
You usually have to rant.
So let's hear your bio, Mr.
I'm
Ford.
Isaac Ford, the third. Originally from Georgia. Grew up most of my teenage years and stuff in California. Military brat. Middle class income family, Southern California, whatever. I joined the Air Force and did aerospace propulsion, a little bit of everything in there. Just mainly a jet engine mechanic. Got out, started taking care of my daughter, and since then I've been pretty much just, into a little bit of everything, school, politics, and starting to kind of, since COVID, I've actually had a chance to look at the specifics of things versus just looking at the big overall picture.
Right.
And like we said, the liberal mindset, and where they'll give you a small portion of something and expect you to kind of fill in the blanks when the actual table's this big.
Yeah.
So you get this much to look at, the table this big, and you need to make a decision. And then you start to get the actual bigger piece of the table, and you need to make that smaller decision. And it's the opposite, because now people are actually being presented with the information. So that's been my transition to even finding my way to you guys right now. It's just kind of changing the lens a little bit.
Well, first off, thank you for your service.
Welcome. Thank you as well.
I'll let you start off the questions. I gotta do something real quick.
Okay. So I guess when you were talking about you feel like you're being targeted because you're a black man that's Republican, define that a little bit more.
I mean, as we both know, like even when you were looking at, say like the past year in the media, 50 Cent, for example, he had a situation where his ex came out and said, you're speaking on voting Republican. You're not allowed to. And it was just kind of like, that started to become a red flag for me. Like if when you're putting a race on a idea, mindset, or a way of living or looking at things, then it's like, okay, and then people bought into that.
Yeah.
And then, a bunch of other comments like Biden saying you're not black if you don't vote for him when he wrote the 1994 crime bill. It's just a lot of irony and weird stuff here that just didn't quite make sense,
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's my main thing. That was my main point of even stepping into this lanes, because it just didn't add up anymore.
Yeah, because one of the things that, and I want you to chime in on this, please. One of the things that really frustrated me is, I'm not saying that Trump was a great president. Yeah, he should have. When you're any type of leader, especially a significant leader like President of the United States, you got to really understand what words mean. And I think he said some stuff he really shouldn't have said.
Yeah, everybody's done it.
Right. But my thing is that, so one of the comments that I got from some of my friends were saying, because I wasn't a fan, and I'm still not, a fan of Kamala Harris,
Yeah.
they said, well, you're anti-diversity. And I said, well, I don't see that I'm anti-diversity. My thing is that if you look at the amount of African-American youth in this country that were locked up for minor possession of marijuana, she was the DA at the time.
There was a lot of men of color locked up underneath her watch.
Yeah, so like, how is she supposedly representing her race when she didn't stand up for a crime bill?
And I've never even been behind the whole Kamala thing, because I'm like, okay, I mean, there's been a lot of information come out about her being or not being so-called African American, and then the whole breakdown of what an African American is, and
Right, yeah.
that's a whole slippery slope. So as far as her being a representation of the so-called African American woman, I mean, we're talking about politics, and that's the thing. People don't go and look at what just happened 10 years ago,
Right.
what just happened 5 years ago, and then make decisions on the future. It's more so, okay, well, she's the face. It makes black women feel good. There's representation. So let's go ahead and ride that out when, I mean, that's not really, that's the whole llama thing again. It made people feel good, but then what did it do?
Yeah. Well, and then my other thing too is like when they said that I didn't celebrate diversity, my question is, well, I celebrated Condoleezza Rice being the first Secretary of State,
Yeah.
but they didn't. And by they, I mean Democrats. Democrats didn't celebrate that because how dare she as a black woman be a Republican and work in that administration?
And that's how it gets shadowed. It's like, you know, even when you talk about, you could go back to Clarence Thomas. He was a Republican, or he wasn't on that side, so it was okay to disrespect him and make him feel that way, or his accomplishments weren't that great. And then you come down to now, even you have a girl like Candace Owens. She's out there saying truthful things that help people, or help people think a certain way, but because she's on a certain side of the fence, it doesn't matter about black people. So she doesn't care about black people because her political party, when the facts are what she's saying does directly correlate to the disparate issues in the community. So it's like, I don't understand what people exactly want. Do you want me to sit on the side that makes you feel good and say what you want, or do you want me to sit in the middle, make my own decision, and then whatever is best for everyone? Because I could go and focus on black.
Right.
But the reality is, most of us come from diverse families. My daughter is half Hawaiian. So it's like, even when it comes down to me, even if I have a problem with her mother's side of the family, that could become a bigger issue for both of us with the climate going on right now. So it's like, everything has to be based on what makes sense, what's right and what's wrong, and the color and the boxes of left and right have to be gone now, because everything that we literally was supposed to be sold in this election, it's not here. So it shows that it's not necessarily voting for a color or someone that makes you, it's what do these people gonna do for you?
Right.
And how long are they gonna do it? So I mean, that's my main thing for me, trying to make a difference on social media or whatever else, is people have to stop worried about so much of these boxes, the color, the economics, all this stuff is why we can't sit here and have a conversation.
Right. You know, because one of the things that I was on another show, and I won't mention their name, years ago, and everybody but me at the table were Democrats. And I said, you know, if we removed the Democrat-Republican tag, and obviously you can't remove the ethnicity tag because it's there, that we're people, that's just the way it is. But I said, if we got rid of all that and just us three just sat down and had a conversation, we didn't talk about religion, we didn't talk about abortion, we didn't even get into politics, I bet you all three of us would probably agree on 80% of everything.
Most of the stuff
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, whether
Same
you're a
stuff.
Republican, Democrat, black, white, Hispanic, Latino, I mean, there's so many that I don't want to disparage anybody, but, like, we've gotten so far from that like, we got to get back to, like, at the end of the day, we're all people. And we all go through challenges in our lives. So one thing is so an example of how specifically have you been attacked because you're a Republican?
More so not being included anymore.
Right.
Not being considered a black man and a part of the black community. It's like once you do that, oh well, no, obviously you're worshiping white people, or you're a reverse black like white supremacist, or you hate your own people now. And I'm like, there's things you have to look at before you say certain things.
Right.
So it's like, now you've said certain things about me, not asking me, how did I get to this conclusion? Okay, let's talk about, if you said you're a Republican, or you say you're a conservative, what about this makes you that? What about this makes you that? Most of my stuff revolves around children.
Yeah.
Protecting children, making sure they have a healthy environment to where they don't have to have these conversations 10 years from now. But most people will say, oh, it's about this or that. Generational wealth and children. So, I mean, if we can't even have that conversation about how I got to that point, but then I'm automatically outcasted, separated from people, then you get into, when you do try to get into the community, it's hard. I mean, because it's a double-edged sword, because you had to walk away from the pro-black mindset and those people that were, all about the democratic, stuff and everything, Black Lives Matter. And then you're trying to go over to people that look at you that way and already have that stigma about you.
Right.
So it's kind of like you have to kind of be in both worlds at the same time. And it balances out. But when it balances out, it's more so, you'll notice that it's not just one group of people. Like, I mean, there's Asians, Hispanics, white folks, people from all over the world following one little small page because they all agree on something. Like you said, they all sat down and took all the other things out of it.
Yeah.
Somebody posts about Jesus, that's great for them. Somebody posts about Buddha, that's great for them. That's what they feel. That's what makes them happy. So that's fine. And
Right.
we can all sit here and say, what's our bigger issue? And that's what's hard for a lot of people to do right now. But, I mean, some of us are getting it.
Yeah.
I feel like some of us are getting it.
See, one of the things that I find ironic, and I think Charles Barkley, this was years ago, Charles Barkley had it, in my opinion, he had a really good point when he said, it's not so much Republican and Democrat anymore, it's rich versus poor. The reason why I wanted to bring that up is because, like you talked about, you're middle class. I'm same way. I'm middle class. I'm far from being rich.
Yeah.
But interesting enough, Sean Puffy Combs, never heard anybody speak out about him being a Republican, or Russell Simmons.
Right.
So how come they're still okay? Like, they're still black enough, even though they're Republican, they're still black enough. But then other people have to deal with the stigma of, like, well, you can't be Republican because you're black.
I think with those two guys, I think it honestly probably comes down to relevance.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're at the end of their career field.
Yeah.
They're the older guys in the rap game, or the, let's just say, people that they're considered the pioneers.
Right.
So now you got the younger guys that can be used to push an agenda or to make sure that people stay, on the Democratic side. So when you see a guy that's a lot younger say, hey, I'm a Republican, he's going to get, they're going to go after him a little bit faster because he could be used by them to bring more people to that side. And you see the guys like you said, Puffy and Russell, well, I mean, they're older. And people kind of forget about them anyway. It's like, they're doing bigger things with the people that don't care about politics anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably how because I've seen a lot of the younger people catch flack. And the older people, not so much at all.
Yeah.
And that is very interesting.
Because one of the things that, another question, and this is an actual question, that I would like to ask you is because I was a part of the county Republican Party for a number of years, and one of the reasons why I ended up leaving the party, I mean, I didn't change my party affiliation, but I didn't want to be affiliated with that group anymore, is because they never took the time to reach out to anybody other than basically rich white people. That's basically all they did. And I was like, hey, you guys are missing, and this was about 2010, you guys are missing a real opportunity here, I said, because from what I know from my friends and the dealings I've had, I'm not necessarily saying that you're going to get a bunch of them to switch party affiliation. Right. They're not going to all of a sudden just overnight become Republican, but there's a real independent streak where they're getting tired of both parties.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the middle.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that are young black guys that are business minded, that do want to have land, that do want to, buy homes and start businesses, and they don't agree with the left anymore. Because left, for me, they just want you to be in corporate America.
Right.
So it's like, at the end of the day, it's like they're in the middle, but they're scared to say, hey, we want to go over here.
Right.
So instead of them doing it, it's guys like me that kind of have to go out here and be like, hey, this doesn't make sense. It's not logical.
Right.
So I think that's honestly what's going on here. But I've had issues reaching out and getting correspondence. There's a lot of things it was going on in my life legally. Needed some help with some assistance.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, they were there, but it wasn't too many resources for us. It was kind of like, if I had been a Democrat with the same problem, people would be behind bars.
Right.
But because I'm young and I'm a Republican and I'm black in Nevada, then that's not even a crime right now.
Right.
Yeah, and hearing you say that always reminds me of that movie with Samuel L. Jackson, A Time to Kill. And so Matthew McConaughey was his attorney, and so, but the NAACP wanted to come in and pay for his defense fund and everything. And it was interesting because Samuel L. Jackson was like, oh, so you've raised this much money from my defense fund. Okay, well then you need to turn that money over to Jake.
Right.
And they're like, whoa, wait a minute, we can't do that. It's got to come from the NAACP. And he's like, no, it's my right to have whatever attorney I want.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how it is, So, I mean, it's kind of like at this point in time for a lot of us, we have to be careful, because, I mean, I don't want to see people out here losing their jobs and stuff just because of what they believe. Because, I mean, it's a lot of that right now, and that's scarce. Yeah. But at the same time, I guess people need to be more, I think people have buyer's remorse right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best thing that's happened. Just say, okay, let people have what they want and sit back and watch and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's happened now. So I think people are a lot more open to coming back to the table and be like, hey, okay, maybe we're wrong about the guy. We didn't like him, but he was definitely better than this.
Right.
So
Well, the way I always look at it is like, it doesn't matter unless you're in the top 1%, and that doesn't apply to either you or I or anybody else. It's close by. Unless you're in that top 1%, like, whether you really necessarily agree with somebody one way or another, when those gas prices start going up and it's costing you more to live and your job choices start going down and it starts really impacting how you can support your family or not.
Or just your kids sitting at home for a full year. And like, we've never experienced anything like a year out of school. Like,
Right.
I mean, that wouldn't even...
We might have tried, but we wouldn't have gotten
the most we might
have
have got was the best summer of 3 or 4 months.
Right.
But all these changes, money, the gas, the food, you see it. Like, we both see it. But they're worried about Mr. Potato Head and stuff. So it's like, we're starting to get that this is important, for all of us. Like, we need this, and it's going away. So
because I remember, like, I was just talking to my brother the other day. I don't eat much fast food, but every once in a while I just don't feel like cooking. So I'm like, we'll go. And I'm starting to look at that bill, and I'm like, and now they're going to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour. I'm like,
yeah, we do a lot more homemade stuff that we like out just because the premium has gone up.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, just to go through a drive-through somewhere, it's $3 more than it was a year ago.
Right.
In 1 year. So I don't know how people are still doing it, but it's crazy. But I mean, those are the issues that at the end of the day, okay, if the TVs went off and you just sit down the street around a fire because everything's turned off, you're human beings talking,
right.
And I'm sure all that stuff you were mad about while you had the luxuries wouldn't matter anymore.
Right.
And that's the sad part. It feels like people have to have all that taken away just to see, hey, that doesn't matter.
Yeah. So what do you think the Republican Party in particular could do better to try to diversify the party? Because, I mean, there is, like, I mean, even with Trump and all the crazy stuff he would say sometimes, like, you would have the Charles Barkleys, the Shacks, like, they didn't necessarily agree with him, but they said, hey, the guy deserves a chance, though. I mean, at least give him a chance.
And that came from media, man. Like, I mean, people have to, like, it's weird for my generation because I'm 33, and I grew up seeing the guy on everything.
Right.
So it's like, that's a household name to my childhood. Like, it's not like you can just magically make him a racist when he was on Fresh Prince and stuff. Like, it's just really hard for me to register that. But people older than us, in their, 50s and beyond, it's easier for them to go and say that because they kind of missed out on that.
Yeah.
They got 30 years of Trump here, 30 years, so it's like, it's a different mindset, and I feel like that's where a lot of it came from.
Yeah.
Because they have the ability to say, okay, well, we have all this stuff, but a lot of us didn't care about that. 'Cause, like, we see what we saw when we were growing up.
Right.
And that's just like anything else. Is you're trying to push on a whole new generation your lens, and that's unfair to me. Like, my daughter's gonna have different issues than I have right now.
Right.
Like, hopefully, by the time she's able to vote, we're not even talking about race and money in politics. We're just talking about basics.
Yeah.
So,
one of the things that and again, thank you for coming on.
No problem.
One of the things that even though I have mixed feelings about Bill Clinton as a president, because I liked George H.W. Bush. Of course, I was really young now.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about, like, his credentials. Like, the guy he had done a lot in his life. But one of the things that Bill Clinton said, he goes, eventually at some point we're going to have to sit down as a society and have a serious discussion about race. And so, like, sitting here conversing with you, I appreciate that, because I think we're having a good conversation.
Right.
Where social media frustrates me, and one of the reasons why I did my rant, is because it just, like, from my perspective, I know so many of my friends that they are truly white liberals. And soon as I talk to them about anything that has to do with being a Republican, I'm automatically a racist. And I'm like, hold on a second. How can you, as a white person, call me a racist, but yet my black friends don't call me racist?
And that's the irony, because
Doesn't make any
I'm a
sense
black
to
white
me.
supremacist
Yeah, right.
for being a Republican.
Yeah.
And that's even like, I'm like,
How does that work?
yeah, I don't understand it. So what are we all like? So what are we just all like, you know, trans racists? So we can, like,
Right.
we're just all the weird races are just going to come together.
Yeah.
I mean, what is this? I'm the terminology and the grouping is just getting out of hand, man.
Yeah.
It's getting out of hand. Like, this is, like I said, like you said earlier, especially when it came down to sports and stuff. I've been in the military. I've played sports. We don't care about that stuff when you're going out to compete.
Yeah.
And when you get that in your mind, when you get that a part of your experience as a human being, it's really hard to make that person a racist.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it was really cool. One of the things that I remember the most about high school, and I'm still really good friends with him, was went over and stayed the night, and he lived on the old west side of town, off Martin Luther King and Miller, which is basically by Lake Mead. And it was so funny because I was sitting there, and he went to bed, and it was just him and his mom.
Right.
And we're talking, and there was a huge generational gap. And she just, like, she was like, we have so much in common because I grew up on a farm. So, I mean, as far as when you're talking about, like, cooking and, like, collard greens and chitlins and all that, I said, no, I'm not eating chitlins. She's like, why? I said, because I hated cleaning them as a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like cleaning them now. And she's like, you've actually done that? And she's like, yeah, right. So she starts asking me all these questions. I'm like, see? There you go. I mean, like, there's that much in common.
There's a lot more in common than people think.
Yeah.
I want to know what makes you a Republican.
What makes me a Republican?
Why are you a Republican?
You want the simple, short answer, the honest answer?
I want the
Because
honest answer. What makes
what
you a
I
Republican?
believe,
Don't make it too complicated.
yeah, what I believe doesn't fit into the left paradigm, period.
And what do you mean by that?
I believe that, especially in my generation, I mean, I've seen a lot of people during the last administration start a lot of businesses, gain a lot of generational wealth for their children, have a lot more freedoms when it came down to medical and a bunch of other things. I'm looking at the fact that the whole corporate thing, the whole corporate lifestyle that, like, you know, everybody walks and does everything. And you see it being projected through television and movies. Again, now, that's not what I agree with. I agree with someone being able to work hard with whatever they have and make something of themselves. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be here in America for, to be able to do whatever with whatever. And I feel like that makes me a Republican versus being a Democrat, because I feel like you should have that opportunity to do it your way. Even if you fail, do it your way. It may take you a few times, but with the left mindset, this is already a cookie cutter paradigm way of doing this. So if you want to be a black professional, you have to do this, you have to pledge this, you have to go to these schools, you have to talk to these guys, you have to be around these people, you have to marry these women. Over here, I can just be me. I can be a single dad, be proud of it. I can have a biracial daughter and not be ashamed of it. I can talk to a guy like this, talk to a guy like you, and have no problem with it because I don't have anybody telling me what I need to be doing. That's why I'm a Republican.
Okay. I haven't had it explained to me like that before, but that makes perfect sense. So your family, what's your family? Your parents?
My family
where
is traditional Southern Baptist. No. Yeah.
Are they Republican?
No.
Okay, because usually people would just go off of what their family is.
And I did for a while.
Because my family is I would consider them to be Democrats.
Yeah, they are, and I was for a while.
But I'm a free thinker, and I don't like to follow. I like to actually lead. I like to be around people that is willing to lead. I don't like to be around
just took it out of my mouth.
Too many followers. But followers are also good to have as well. But I just think that however you look at life, that's what you should be. Like for example, if you want to be an entrepreneur, or if you want less taxes and you don't want government interference in your life, then you're a Republican. But if you don't have any problems with government telling you what to do, and government say, okay, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z, you're never gonna lift yourself above that because you're going to be comfortable with what government is providing for you,
right.
And you're never going to want to make it on your own.
And I think that's like why most young black people should be trying to move to the Republican side, because it's like, okay, you get handouts, you know the handout's coming, you know how to position yourself for the handout. Your mom had the handout, your dad had the handout, your grandparents had the handout. Okay,
so it's comfortable and you normalize it.
Yeah, okay, so what if you had that handout and then you worked a little harder and did something else and then broke out of that mold and then did something else? So now you just out of making a simple decision, changed your tax bracket for your whole family for the next 2 generations because you didn't want to be in the cookie cutter mold of comfortability.
It's like a lot of retired people out there, okay? They get their retirement check every month, right? But they're still out there doing something. They're still out there trying to improve people's lives.
Right.
And they're still out there trying to make more money. And they have their own little business on the side. And then you got some people that are just comfortable with what they get every month,
right.
And they don't go above that means, and they just live that life, and they stay home, and they don't do a damn thing.
Yeah.
Those are 2 different type of people that are comfortable.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me, like, especially this year. Like, I've been set back. You can ask my daughter. Like, we had plans on plans on plans,
right.
And then, like, boom, the hammer of, this comes down. So, for me, I've had to just sit there and just kind of, like, pay attention, watch, observe. And now I think, honestly, if people took that time this year to do that, they paid attention to politics, they paid attention to money, real estate, social issues, religious issues. So now, nobody, when we come out of this time, nobody should have an excuse, because like you said, the comfortability. And I think a lot of veterans should come out of this a lot stronger minded, to where there's nobody just sitting around.
For example, is this whole COVID thing, okay? And they tell you that you need to get these shots, right?
Right.
And I look at it like, I'm like, wait a minute, so you need to get these shots, and I don't know, because I'm on the fence with these shots, because when I was in the Gulf War, right, they gave us shots for blister agent, and they gave us shots for nerve agent. And it was never FDA approved, okay? The military is guinea pigs, okay? They test everything on the military, right? Yep. Because they figure they're expendable, right? But in my case, when I took the shots in 1990, okay, and you had to sign a confidentiality waiver. When you sign a confidentiality waiver,
whatever goes,
you know that something is not right, right? You can't talk about this, it's not right. And I didn't experience the side effects until 2001, right? So I'm saying, okay, so these COVID shots that we're all getting, globally getting, how many years did they spend to find out if there's any side effects on it?
Well, the trials were supposed to be done in 2023.
You know?
That's all I mean, literally, that's all I could. It takes a certain amount of time to even be created to understand what it will do.
So it's usually the veterans is going to be the one that's saying, wait a minute, no. Like the Vietnam with the Agent Orange, and it took them, 20 years to develop side effects? And
right.
So I'm like on the fence. I'm like, okay, they say you're supposed to get it to stop the epidemic from increasing, but at the same time, what are the side effects? What are the long-term side effects?
They don't know.
How many years did we do to find out if this thing is, if you're gonna cause blindness, you're gonna liver damage, or whatever the case might be? Look at tobacco. Look how long it took them to start figuring out. Okay, well, cigarettes cause cancer. Cigarettes damage your lungs.
But see, even with cigarettes, at least that's something that came from the earth. Like, you're talking about something that's literally purely made in a lab and has portions of it that might, I don't know. It's not. So you should definitely.
So I'm thinking, is this shot gonna wipe out mankind if everybody gets it?
Well, I don't think everybody's gonna get it.
No, everybody's not gonna get it.
Most of the people aren't gonna get it.
But then they're giving you cards now. So I don't know what that means. You can't travel on an airline unless you have this card, or you can't go on mass transportation unless you have this card. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because humans act like sheep. They follow the flock, right? And then if you put fear or a fearmonger into society, that's exactly how they're gonna follow that fearmongering. It's like Democrat, Republican. If I'm a Democrat, you got to be a Democrat because those Republicans, they're racist,
right?
And they're this and they're that. So then you grew up becoming a Democrat because of what your parents are telling you, or whoever. So. I think that people need to do their research, and they need to educate themselves on certain things.
Everything now. Everything.
To be better, have a better understanding of what's going on.
Right.
So, and how were you targeted, by the way? Jim, did you cover that? And my apologies, because today was a rough day. We had a few people coming in and out to do certain things. I had to go and attend to that.
I mean, some of what we talked about mainly is just, the black sheep effect, and that's everywhere. Friends, family, anybody. Because there was a good wave. Black Lives Matter had a really strong wave. They had a really good movement this time around, the last 2 years or so. And a lot of people that, if you even said anything against that, you're pretty much gone out of whatever groups, social groups. Because it just wasn't good for business on any level for anybody. So that's mainly what happened. It starts to trickle down your family, and then they're like, oh, well, let's keep him over here because he's not representing what we stand for, and then friends and everyone else. And then being, like, for example, being coming in from the liberal area, that's where you're expected to be. And then you move over to the Republican side, a lot of the black people look at you as being a traitor. And then a lot of the white people look at you as either you some kind of weirdo or op or spy, or you actually about this. So now you got to prove to both sides that you're genuinely about everybody. And that's pretty much what we're, summing up. Is you got to be in the gray area, like literally where you're just talking to human beings.
And what I can't understand is the way our system of government work, especially our lawmakers. If you have a good piece of legislation, and just because you're the opposite party, they won't vote for it.
Right.
Although this piece of legislation is the betterment for the community as a whole, or the state as a whole, or the country as a whole, they won't vote for it because you're on the wrong party. And I think that type of thinking is just childish, the way some of these lawmakers think. And if you're if let's say that you're in the assembly, Mr. Ford, and people on the other side don't like you, so they're gonna ostracize your bill because they just don't like you. And this high school mentality that our lawmakers have needs to go, because if something, if a piece of legislation is going to help the community, the state, the country, it doesn't matter who is sponsoring it or from what party is sponsoring it.
Right.
As long as it's helping, I think everybody should be on board with that.
And see, that's another reason why I went Republican, because it's like if it doesn't make sense, then that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
Like everything else, it's like it just has to go because they said, or this guy pushed this over here, so we got to all push it now. Like that whole mentality is like, I saw it in the military, I saw it in other places, and it's like literally the sheep herder. Like everyone has to be able to think for themselves. That way, when they get to the destination, if one guy has to step to the side, somebody else can step up.
Right. What branch of service were you in?
Air Force.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you too, sir.
Although, Air Force.
Yeah, I know how you guys feel about that.
I got a statement, and then I got one more question for you after that.
All right.
Because the question's about the Air Force, because my brother Steve was in the Air Force.
Okay.
Okay, so to kind of, I don't know, there's so many words about it. Dovetail or piggyback on what Steve was just saying. So when Bill Clinton was going through, they knew he was going to get impeached. Mm-hmm. And I honestly didn't think he should have been impeached. But anyway, talking about childish behavior. Anyway, Clinton knew after his first 2 years in office that there was a good chance he was not going to get reelected because he had moved too far to the left. And he knew that he had to move back to the center in order to get reelected. So he got with Trent Lott, which was the Senate Majority Leader at the time. They came up with a deal that would make Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security solvent by the end of 2000. Some Democrat senators got wind of this, and they said, you can't go through with this bill. And they're like, well, why not? And they go, well, you're going to get impeached because they have the votes. But as long as you don't go ahead with this bill, then we'll make sure that it never goes to trial in the Senate. We have enough members, we'll just kick it out. So again, there you go, childish behavior. Like what could have benefited the country greatly, he wasn't willing to do because he didn't want to lose his job. And then Tom DeLay, who was in charge of the House at the time, there were a lot of people that said, just don't push this impeachment thing. It's a sex thing, just let it go. It's not that big of a deal. But our supposed leaders decided, so Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security are still a joke. Yeah. And then the question I have for you is, so you said you were in the Air Force. What did you do in the Air Force?
I did a little bit of everything. Mainly, I was a jet engine mechanic. That was my trade.
What mechanic?
Jet engine mechanic.
Oh, jet engine.
Yeah, I worked on 16s, B-1 bombers for the most part.
You working at McCarran?
I worked at...
or Boeing?
No. I was at Luke and Dyess Air Force bases. My body's so messed up from working on those planes, and now it's like just getting on your knees in positions. I can't do it no more.
Yeah, and the reason why I was asking is because you said about being a mechanic. Mm-hmm. My my brother was a crew chief on the B-2 at Whiteman.
Okay,
Yeah.
Crew chiefs, they get it too.
Yeah.
Always on the flight line, literally.
So you have anything else for Mr. Ford?
No, other than I just really appreciate you coming in. And
yeah, I might have to come back again.
And And just also want to thank your daughter for being so nice and polite and patient through all this.
She's
How
my
old is she?
agent. She's 9.
She's very, very good behaved. Mr. Ford, could you look into the camera and just try to summarize and tell folks why they should be free thinkers, basically, and do their thing?
I mean, for me,
your point of contact, if you want to give it.
Yeah, I'm on the Instagram right now. It's my main point of contact. I am Zeke17. And I'm always posting on there and everything else. But I would say for most people, right now, you need to really just have a independent, clear thinking mind. There's a lot of people out here trying to tell you to go one way till you do anything else. And you have children. I'm sure you have investments. I'm sure you have something that you've worked hard for to establish and to keep in your life. And if that is the only thing that can keep you from being divisive towards another person, or that can keep you in the mindset of being a free thinker, because being a free thinker, it means that you're not willing to judge someone else based on their view, but willing to actually look at and see if it fits yours, if you guys can come to a ground or something. So I'm just saying, we got to heal the country. I mean, there's too many people that could be helping each other that are fighting with one another right now. And at this point, we're all we really have, and everyone's watching us. So, I mean, with that kind of pressure, we got to really rise to the occasion as patriots, as regular citizens, whatever you love, whatever you call your creator or your divine energy. That's what we got to do.
Very well said.
Thank you, sir.
Jim?
No, I'm good.
Folks, that's Isaac Ford, and he was discussing why he was targeted for being a black Republican. This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jonas. Next show is going to be Wednesday next week. We'll see you then.